Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jay. He's Maddie. This is Yankee and the Brit. We are going to review championship weekend, and my camera just decided to get all foggy right as we came on.
right as we
Maybe that
right as
maybe
we
that's a
play.
blessing for everybody watching. I don't know.
Yeah, well, YouTubers usually do this thing where it's like really bright at the front and foggy in the background. You've kind of gone the other way, like foggy in the front, bright in the background, which is just quite fun. Just rejigging the game, man, redoing the game.
Yeah, and I'd like to blame it on YouTube, but I think it's kind of my equipment. I think it's
Yeah,
like,
well, when we start getting sponsors, we can get nice cameras. Like
yeah,
I was lucky
like,
enough to get this nice microphone from my uncle.
can we get like a like maybe an Apple sponsorship? That would fucking do us well.
Yeah, nice Apple sponsorship. Sony, they make fantastic cameras, To be honest,
I wanted the whole Apple upgrade plus the new iPhone. That's like I was going for.
Just the whole shebang.
Yeah, if you're gonna go for it, unless you're Dan Campbell, right?
Hey, great. It is a football show after all.
So, Maddie, we had a couple games yesterday we got to watch. Let's start with the first one first. So we had the Ravens taking on the Chiefs. What were your first impressions of the Ravens-Chiefs game before we dive in?
Yeah, I think like the thing that stood out to me in that game was one team looked like they belonged on that stage, and one team looked like they were overwhelmed by that stage. And I'm obviously talking about the Chiefs, who've been to, what is it now, 6 AFC Championship games in a row. Whereas the Ravens offense, especially, probably a bit harsh on their defense, but their offense especially looked like they'd never been there before. They were overwhelmed. They were overly emotional, which is something that we're going to get to in the other game as well. Whereas the Chiefs were cool, calm, and collective and did what they needed to do to win the game.
Yeah, and I've seen some people shitting on Lamar, and I think Lamar's kind of the last guy to be shitting on in this. He didn't play awful. He had one interception, but like he didn't play awful. I mean, he had over 300 all-purpose yards. They just one thing that really I think hurt them is if you take Lamar out of it, the Ravens could not get the running game going. They couldn't. And Zay Flowers stepped up. And all I want to say is I said at the beginning of the draft, like, Zay Flowers is going to be a good receiver. This dude's even impressed me, who had high hopes for him.
Yeah, I mean, he did have probably the stupidest 5 minutes of football I've seen. Like he did, like he's a young rookie, so we'll get to that when we're talking about the over emotional stuff. But yes, he looked great he was the only. I've seen a few Ravens fans taking to forums and blaming Zay Flowers and saying they should get the trade and all of that stuff. He was the only reason you were even moving the ball at all. And he's guilty of being over emotional rather than not being a good football player. And he'll learn from that. And he got called out, and his second stupid play was trying to make up for his first stupid play. He was trying to make up, and it's difficult for a rookie to go through that. And I hope it doesn't affect him like too badly in the long term. But I think what happened to the Ravens is they got spooked, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think the Ravens got spooked by the Chiefs driving down the field twice and scoring 14 points. Like, I think they got spooked. I think they were like, we're going to have to be in a shootout. They got away from what they were good at. They got away from, like, all right, they struggled to run the ball, but I think they also got away from it too quickly. I don't think Lamar was at fault for losing the game, but I do think that interception was horrible, like really, really bad. But the thing that I was most concerned with Lamar about was his hesitation to take off. I think the reason why we didn't see as many run yards out of Lamar is when the pocket collapsed, he was still looking to throw, which isn't a bad thing. But there you go. You're on fuzzy now. He's back. But it wasn't a bad thing from Lamar having to try and win it from the pocket. But I think he just didn't take off at points. He was trying to win it from the pocket too often.
Yeah, and with the Ravens though, if you take Lamar and Zay Flowers out of the discussion, Nelson Aguilar with one catch for 39 yards had the most yards. And that's not just receivers. That's running backs too, because their top runner outside of Lamar was Gus Edwards with 20 yards.
Yeah, I think Lamar missed OBJ on that inside fade, but that's a difficult throw, and it's one throw in the game. Like the Ravens wide receivers weren't really getting open, but I think that's more to do with the Chiefs. We've said it for a while now, probably since the mid part of the season. The Chiefs' defense is probably the most underrated in the league. I'm trying to think of a defense that's more underrated than the Chiefs. Like, if you said 3 years ago the Chiefs are going to get to a Super Bowl where in the AFC Championship game they only score 17 points, we would have called you crazy. But they've molded into a totally different way of winning the game where they get ahead because they have Mahomes and Kelsey in those big moments. Isaiah Pacheco can run the ball so they can do these long extended drives where even if they don't score the points, at least they're taking time off the clock. And then their defense holds up. Like they were blanketing them in coverage. That secondary was incredible in coverage. And the wide receiver options, which are better in Baltimore than they have been, weren't getting open.
Yeah, I don't want to discredit the Chiefs at all by saying this, so that's not what I'm saying. Like when I talk about their defense played amazing, but I gotta put some of the blame just on the Ravens offense, on the fact that if you go through the stat line, nobody, like I said, besides Zay and Lamar, even had anything looking like a productive game, and that's a problem. Like nobody stepped up, right? Justice Hill had 1 yard or 3 rushes for 3 yards. I mean, he had 4 receptions for 34. You're looking at Odell Beckham, 3 for 22. Likely 2 for 16. Andrews, 2 for 15. Zay Flowers, I mean, is the only guy who, him and Lamar are the only ones who seem to show up. And at one point in that game, it felt like Lamar was like, okay, if I don't fucking do this, we're not going to win. And it ended up causing problems. And I think not having any of your other skill players step up, get open, do what they need to do, puts too much pressure on a guy like Lamar, and not just a guy, any quarterback, right? I mean, Lamar's getting shit on all over this morning. Like he's the reason they lost the game. And I'm like, hey, there's so much more into that game than Lamar's interception. They're not even in that game if it's not for Lamar. And the fact is, I mean, they only lost the game by 7 points. It's not like they got blown the fuck out. And their defense the Ravens defense did their job. They held Kansas City to 17. Like you were just saying, what would we say if Kansas City only scored 17 points, right? So yeah. I feel like the players who stepped up all year decided not to step up in the biggest game of the year. I mean, not decided, but you know that's a bad choice of words, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think this goes into the part of, look, I don't put loads of stock in playoff experience because teams change so quickly every year. So for most teams, not a lot of teams are going to have the same players that go to the NFC Championship games a couple of times. The Chiefs are a totally different animal. Like the Chiefs have been to the AFC Championship now 6 years in a row. So their team does have that playoff experience. The Ravens also have this idea of their playoff experience, which is they choke in the playoffs and they're going against that. It's also the first game that they have in Baltimore, the first AFC Championship game ever hosted in Baltimore, and all of that kind of stuff. And I think it really got to the players. One, I also think it got to the play callers on the offensive side of the ball a little bit, because they got away from what they were doing so well throughout the season, which is we're going to bully you up front. We're going to run the ball. We've also got this guy called Lamar Jackson who will just burst off a big play. So if our running back is like, if the front isn't good for our running back, Lamar will just take off and they'll bully you up front, and then they'll hide behind their defense, and then they'll hit big plays to Zay Flowers, and eventually it'll get into the second half where we've beat you up so much in the first half where now we're just going to run you over in the second half. And they got away. Like, we say that the running backs didn't step up. Well, there was only 6 carries given to running backs in this game. They only handed the ball off 6 times. Yes, Justice Hill only had 3 yards of carry, but Gus Edwards averaged 6.9 yards of carry off his 3 carries. Like,
well, 8 if you count the 2 handoffs to Zay Flowers, but I get what you're saying to the running back.
Yeah. To running backs, where it's not on jet sweeps and all of that kind of stuff. And I think they got spooked by Kansas City, and it's the old Kansas City where they come out and they've scored 14 points in 2 drives. Like, oh my God, it's Kansas City. They're about to go AWOL. Well, the defense made excellent adjustments and stopped the Chiefs. You're only 7 points down. I don't understand why. Like, I get like kind of getting caught up in the moment in the first half and trying to throw on it, but then they made no adjustment in the second half to say we need to at least, even if they're stuffing the run, because the Chiefs were selling out on the run, which makes it even more amazing that their cornerbacks had such blanket coverage. They were selling out on the run, but even keeping the run honest then opens a lane for Lamar Jackson, then opens like one more linebacker comes down into the box so Zay Flowers can find a nice bit of zone. They also seem to go away from throwing to their big tight ends. Mark Andrews was there. Isaiah Likely was there. Isaiah Likely, when he got his 2 catches, looked excellent. I'm not sure how many times he was targeted in the game, but I don't think it was much more than the 2 that he actually caught. So I really do think that this could be I think the whole organization got caught up in the moment of this huge AFC Championship game. And to be honest, the Chiefs are intimidating to play against. And I think that's what's happened. I think they've got the offensive side of the ball, got intimidated by Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. That's not to blame on Lamar. The play calling isn't something you blame on Lamar.
No, and Snead and McDuffie may be the most underrated quarterback or cornerback duo in the NFL. They've been playing great all year. That Chiefs defense is really tough up front. We've talked about that too. Chris Jones was in the backfield all day long, which there was times where I looked up and I'm like, how do they let this and I know it's easy to say from my couch, but you're like, how do they let this 300-pound dude just take over the whole offensive line? Why aren't you even triple teaming him at times? Because I felt like the whole middle of the field at times was just up in Lamar's face. But again, I agree with you. It feels like there was almost some intimidation that happened during the game as it was going, because, and I like how you said it, the play callers, because it's, what was that stat here I was looking at that? So if you think about Rice in this game, even the Ravens did a pretty good job of shutting him down. They let him get 8 receptions, but for only 46 yards. But when you go over the Ravens side, I mean, there's nobody even on the team with 8 receptions. You know what I mean? Like, the defense shut the Ravens down completely, whereas even though the Ravens defense played a good game because you held Kansas City to 17 points, if you start comparing back and forth, their number 1 receiver is Zay Flowers for the Ravens. And besides Travis Kelce, the stat lines are pretty close to the same, right? So if besides Travis Kelce, Zay Flowers, that's a wash, right? I'm just saying, if you take them side by side, both defenses play great. Why was it that the Ravens couldn't move the ball? The Ravens couldn't score? I like how you put it. It has me thinking, was it a lot to do with the offensive play calling? Because if you go down the numbers, the stat lines are very close for both teams. And the fact that they're blaming this whole game on Lamar is what blows my mind, because I feel like, and tell me if you feel differently, Lamar's the only reason the Ravens were in this game.
Yeah, I do think Lamar missed a number of a number of throws. I don't think Lamar had his best game. The idea people are now saying, like, well, he shouldn't be the MVP. One, that means you don't understand what the MVP vote is. And two, like, he didn't have his best game, but he wasn't awful. Like, Patrick Mahomes in the second half also didn't put up any points in the entirety of the second half. I believe they both just nobody scored any points in the second half. Now with the Chiefs, is it
Baltimore scored 3 in the fourth, but
right, 3 in the fourth? Yeah. Is it? Oh yeah, of course they did. Is it the Chiefs take their foot off the gas a little, run out time on the clock, run behind Isaiah Pacheco, like that kind of thing? Whereas what they were asking Lamar to do on the offensive play calling, Lamar usually gets the ball out. That offense is predicated on getting the ball out pretty quickly. Like, I think he was averaging 2.2 seconds in the preseason, might be in the offseason, in the regular season. Sorry, might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it's about 2.2 seconds. Whereas this time, and this leads me to talking about the strip sack, because obviously he did throw 1 interception and he also had 1 strip sack. That shit looked like it was in slow motion because of how long they were asking Lamar Jackson to hold on to the ball when they were blitzing him. It's Spagnuolo. He's blitzing you every down. Why aren't we running a slant? Why isn't there a quick out? Why is everything dropped back? Deep ball crosses over the middle of the field. It felt like they were trying to take those big chunk plays. It felt like they were more than what they finished 7 points down, but they were 10 points down for most of the game. It felt like they were way more than 10 points down for most of that game because they're trying to do these massive chunk plays. And that strip sack is Lamar waiting for the play to develop, to go downfield, reeling up to launch the ball downfield, and the whole thing happened in slow motion. You could see it on the TV. You were like, he's going to get strip sack here, like from a long way out. And also shout out to Carl Loftus, who had an absolutely amazing game.
Yeah, I remember we talked a lot about him coming out of the draft a couple of years ago, and to watch where he's come is pretty awesome. The thing is so Lamar, missed what, 17 throws, 17 incompletions to Patrick Mahomes 9. But again, you go to the stat lines, Lamar actually threw for more yards. I mean, he ran for way more yards than Patrick Mahomes. Both defenses played well. It was that case of, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, but I had brought this up, where there's always those games where one team gets the ball, drives down the field, and fucking scores, and then doesn't do anything the rest of the game. And that's what happened with the Ravens. It was like you had that one good drive where, like, this is going to be a game, and then nothing the rest of the game. Because you get that field goal, whatever. You can count that field goal in the fourth. But if you would have told me that the Ravens were only going to score 10 points in this game, I would have thought everybody was fucking crazy.
Yeah, I think it is also important to remember that they were at the 1 yard line and then fumbled it into the end zone as well. So they were in this game. Like, I think if we take away the interception, which got them kicked out of field goal range, which was such a bad throw, but I'm willing to chalk that up to you? No, I'd remember.
Why the fuck would you force that into the end zone? Like,
there was no need. Yeah, it felt like, to me, the stress that was hitting on the offensive play calling started to get to Lamar Jackson a little bit when we saw that there, where it looked like everything was on his shoulders. He tried to hero ball it. Like, that was a Josh Allen throw to me. That was the kind of mistake that Josh Allen makes a lot of the time when he's trying to go full hero ball as well. And he's trying to force it to Isaiah Likely, which I don't hate, but he's covered by 3 guys in the end zone. Like, that's also, if there's 3 covering Isaiah Likely, there must be somebody open there, right? Like, unless the Chiefs are playing with 15 on the field, like, there had to be somebody to throw to, which at times the Chiefs defense did look like they had 15 on the field because they were covering that well. But I think it is important to remember that they did move the ball down the field. Their mistakes, the Ravens' mistakes, cost them heavily in this game in terms of the emotion. The Chiefs have the most penalized offensive line in the regular season. I think they're now the least penalized team in the postseason, or something. Like, it's a crazy stat like that, where they've gone from the most penalized to the least penalized. That it took until deep into the second half for them to get any holding calls against them and those kind of things, and they normally get holding calls and false starts. So the Chiefs played an incredibly clean game because they've been here before. This is the baseline for them for the past 6 years. The baseline is the AFC Championship game for the past 6 years. Whereas for the Ravens, it felt like they let their emotions bubble over. I think to the Van Noy headbutt, which, like, you can say what you want, and everybody's posting the classic. Like, everybody's posting the classic referees in the red and white stripes and saying that. I get it. It was chippy all game. Like, that was going on all game. It was chippy, but you did it right in front of the referee. Travis Kelce is going to sell that, like, a little bit. Like, you've got to hold your emotions in check. And Zay Flowers taunting call, man. Like, let's talk about that 5 minutes that Zay Flowers had. He had an amazing game outside of 5 minutes, which really cost his team, where the taunting call, where he catches a great play for a young wide receiver. You might have just got your team totally back in the game. Like, that touchdown changes everything. He pushes the guy down to look at him so the defender can watch him taunt him on the ground, and is just begging to be flagged for 15. Then, to make up for that, which I get the need to want to make up for it, make the special play. And I don't hate reaching out over the end zone, but just tuck it, just throw your whole body in. You don't need to reach the ball. Like, he's athletic enough where if he just held the ball close to his body, he would torpedo over the top there. And a great play by Snead, and the Chiefs have been doing that all year. But he tries to, and it fumbles, and a touchback in the end zone, turnover, and then he goes to the fucking bench, slams his helmet down on the bench, and lacerates his finger. Like, that summed up, that 5 minutes from Zay Flowers summed up the difference between the Ravens and the Chiefs for me in that game.
Yeah, well, if I would have told you before that game, there is a prop bet that only 3 points get scored in the second half, nobody's taking that prop bet from Vegas. Not a single person. So it was a wild game in itself. And we talked about it during the year. The Chiefs just figure out how to do it. The Chiefs just figure out how to win the game. However, the game, if they can't dictate how the game's being played, they still figure out how to beat you at the game that's being played. You know what I mean? And shout out to the coaching staff, shout out to the Chiefs. There is no way I thought that game was going to be a 10-17 or 17-10 game at all.
Yeah, it's not that the Chiefs took their emotion out of the game either, because they played with edge, but they played with edge in the right way, where Travis Kelce was getting guys to headbutt him. Like, he was playing with the edge where he was at the point of like the fight, and then getting them to make the foul. And it's little things like that make championship teams, like we call it in rugby, winning in the dark arts. Like, the team who are best at the dark arts of the game are the team that wins the championships. So, like, the teams that cheat the best
in the dark art. Motherfucker, you ever watched Harry Potter?
We're British. We're all magic. Do you not know that?
Every fucking movie in Harry Potter, it's the fucking dark arts teacher who's the fucking problem.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here? The dark arts. Okay.
You are the problem. Yeah, they're the problem, and they win you the games.
It's just, I don't know if this says more about the Chiefs or Baltimore, and this is getting ahead of themselves, but this game makes me have a lot of questions about the Super Bowl because of watching both teams. Like, we watched Kansas City struggle on and off all year, but then the playoffs hit. We've talked about it for weeks now. They just started clicking. But there were times where they looked at, like, the Chiefs yesterday of the regular season, who got beat by the Lions, even though it was the first game of the year, or lost some games we didn't think they should lose. And this isn't the best Chiefs team we've seen, but it may be the best Ravens team we've seen in a long time, and they still lose to this Chiefs team. I'm not saying you blow the whole thing up, but I do think it leaves a lot of questions for the Ravens. Like, what do we do from here? How do we build on what we already got? And I hate to say it because I like him, but like it seems like the whole season they overpaid for OBJ.
Yeah, if he made a circus catch on that fade, which was misthrown by Jackson, then he makes the whole thing is worth it. If he makes that catch, and at points in the season, OBJ looked really good. Look, I think with this game in particular, it showed both things. Like the Ravens beat themselves, but the Chiefs also do what they have to win. And you say this is the worst Chiefs team, but actually it's the best Chiefs defense. It's the best Chiefs running game. Like they just play a totally different style of ball. Look, I think the Chiefs team from earlier seasons fucking blows these teams out. Like, don't get me wrong. But like we always say, defense wins championships until the Chiefs kind of came along. And now the Chiefs have this defense which can win them this championship. It's already won them the AFC championship. This defense. I think it's that whole game was very interesting because if the Ravens did get close, if Zay Flowers does score that touchdown, does the game plan on the offense then just change to, okay, Mahomes and Kelsey take over again? Like, does it change back to that? Because they had those two drives at the start where Kelsey had, did he have 11 receptions on the night or something, has the most link ups in playoff, the most catches
11 for 116
playoff history. Yeah, he passed Jerry Rice in most catches in playoff history after passing Gronk the week before in touchdowns and those kind of things. So
the most overpraised wide receiver in NFL history. Okay, sorry. Jerry Rice being called the GOAT really bothers me, but that's a whole different conversation. So I had to take my little dig at Jerry Rice.
But I think if the Ravens got closer, I think the Chiefs then scheme up their offense in a totally different way and they just go out and score another touchdown and then it's 24 points. Like the Chiefs did what they needed to do to win. There was no need to blow them out. And also the Ravens defense was incredible. Kyle Hamilton in that game, after getting bullied by Kelsey a little bit on the first two drives, Kyle Hamilton then fucking just took over like in the rest of the game. So the Ravens defense is fantastic. And when we move on to the next game, it looks like it's better than the 49ers defense as well.
Yeah, I'm still sitting here thinking about how it was Kyle Vanoy who made the boneheaded play when he's the vet on that team, right? Like, I mean, he's the vet. This honestly might be his last year. He's been in the league for so long, right? And he was playing so good this year. And if this is his last game and you go out like that, then you can't say the whole loss is on him. But like you said, there was a time in that game where it felt like the Ravens just imploded.
Yeah, it just felt like the Ravens just overboiled into, and it coincided with Lamar missing a few throws. It coincided with a few missed assignments on the offensive line. So Lamar was getting a lot of pressure that he didn't need to get. And the surprise with Kyle Van Noy is he's been in this situation with the Patriots before. Like, imagine it. Like, that's what makes me think back to the coaching staff again, because he wouldn't do that in this situation under Bill Belichick. Like, during the Patriots, Kyle Van Noy wouldn't have done that. Like, that's not something he would have done. So what happened in the Ravens before the game and in halftime that led to these emotions, like playing too much on emotion and not using their emotion in the right way? And I bet the Chiefs are an annoying as fuck team. Like, Patrick Mahomes sounds like he just doesn't shut up, and it can't be nice. Like, being chatted shit on you by a guy who sounds like Kermit the Frog. Like, you know, like also like Travis Kelce is now dating Taylor Swift. And I bet you they chat shit to him about Taylor Swift the entire game. But I also bet that Travis Kelce is prepped for that and ready to just destroy anybody who says anything. Like, I bet they're wind-up merchants. So it might be down to the Chiefs as well.
Well, I just don't know why when the Ravens got in their feelings, they didn't just shake it off. All right, bad Taylor Swift.
Go on.
All right.
Yep, good one. Good one. Like it. Like it. Yep. Sorry, that just took me a second. Oh. That just took me a second. Just the final thing on the Chiefs. For me, this is getting to the Super Bowl, whether they win it or not, is Mahomes and Andy Reid's best achievement for me. Winning the AFC Championship game with the way their regular season went just confirmed to me that these are probably the two best in their, like two of the best in their position of all time, as if it needed more confirming. Yeah. But it puts Andy Reid into a conversation of the best coaches of all time. Yeah.
We do talk about the Chiefs like they actually sucked ass this year, and they did have 12 wins. So it is kind of wild when we think about it that way too, right? Like we act like they just squeaked into the playoffs.
It's the way that they look. The way that they looked in those 12 wins, though, was poor. Like they kind of did the opposite of what the Eagles did going into the playoffs, right? Where the Chiefs, they both went in poorly. One turned on the switch and one wasn't able to turn on the switch, right?
Yeah, the last 3 games of the regular season, I'll go back to it for the Eagles. That's where I thought they were going to turn on the switch, and they didn't. And where the Chiefs walked into the playoffs, that first game in the playoffs, I messaged you and I said, oh, shit, the Chiefs are back.
Yeah, I think it like that game against the Bills, it was for me where I was like, that wasn't even close. Like people are saying how close that game was between the Chiefs and the Bills, and that game wasn't even close. Like the Chiefs fumble it over the goal line. They drop an interception from Josh Allen. That game shouldn't have been anywhere near as close as it actually was. Whereas like this game, and I also feel like they had this game under control as well. Like even though this was probably a bit closer and they didn't score any points in the second half, I do think if the game got close, they would have drove down the field. I would have been so surprised if they didn't drive down the field again and just got it done.
Yeah, it's so wild to me because if you would have told me the stat lines were going to be this close and this low, I would have put the edge to Baltimore, right? The gritty, tough, blue collar, put your head down team that ground out a 17-10 victory. But it wasn't that. And that's what I think is the most surprising to me is that the Chiefs were actually the grittier team. And I would have never felt that way because going into the game, they always feel like more of the finesse team, and the Baltimore felt like more of the blue collar, gritty, in your face, hard running, hard hitting team. And it was complete opposite where the Chiefs were the out grittied the Ravens. They were the team that like, it blew my mind when I saw the stat line. What did Pacheco have? 68 yards or something on 24 carries. Like the dude had like 2.8 yards per carry, but it seemed like
he had 2.8 yards a carry.
It seemed like he had a better game than that when you were watching them play.
Yeah, that's what I mean by like the Chiefs felt like they were in control of this game. They actually watching the game, when I sat down this morning after finally getting to sleep after the second game finished at 5 a.m. over here, actually getting down and sitting down and looking at the stats don't reflect how that game was to me. Like I still felt like the Chiefs were in control of that game, even if Lamar made that big throw down the line to OBJ and even if Zay Flowers got over the line, I just think the Chiefs were in total control. I think they wouldn't have ran the ball 24 times and for only 2.8 yards a carry if they weren't ahead and their defense wasn't shutting out and the Ravens weren't beating themselves on the offensive side of the ball because the Ravens were selling out to stop the run at that point, which is why Pacheco only got 2.8 yards a carry of 24 carries. Like I have the feeling that if the game got closer, they will put it back in Mahomes' hands. It feels like they got to a point where they're like, yeah, we're ahead. Let's take it out of Mahomes' hands and just run the clock. And they managed to run the clock for the entire second half, which was crazy impressive.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the Nostradamus of football today. I took the Chiefs in that money line. I figured that would happen. And then in the game we're going to talk about here, the Lions and the 49ers, we both picked the 49ers with the Lions to cover. And at the end, Maddie messages me and we goes, we could use with a Lions score to hit the spread here, which literally made me laugh. That we're watching this game where I am literally in my feelings because I do not want the Lions in the Super Bowl. It's pissing me off. I finally am calm, like, all right, 49ers got this, and Maddie messages me, hey, we could use the fucking the Lions to score right here.
You could use the, see, it was the fact that the Lions went, and we'll get into it in more depth, but it's the fact that the Lions went up by, what was it? What was their biggest lead?
17 points. Yeah, or yeah, 17
so
points.
21 points was their biggest.
No, it was 24 to 3. It was one of the biggest comebacks in championship history.
Yeah. So whatever thing the Lions got up to, we were like, yep, whatever happens, even if the 49ers come back, they'll cover this 7-point spread. And we needed a last-stitch touchdown to cover the spread. And the way that they scored that touchdown actually meant that they had no chance of really winning the game, which was pretty crazy. But shall we just jump into it? What do you want to talk about first? Do you want to talk about why we think the Lions lost, or do we want to talk about what the 49ers did well?
Well, I will say okay, so all week we talked about for the Lions to win this game, their best chance is to jump out on top, get a lead, and make the 49ers, play from behind. That's exactly what they did. 14-0 going into the second quarter. The Lions are up. It's looking bad. Like, at this point, if you're San Francisco, what are you thinking? Like, nobody got shook. And there is at a point where as much as we talk about the coaching staff for the Ravens not making the right adjustments, the 49ers impressed me with the way that they went in at halftime and made all those adjustments. What are your thoughts on the first half of the game before we get into the bad play calling?
Yes, I think the Lions probably played one of the best halves of football that they've ever played. I think the 49ers came out poorly. This 49ers defense isn't as good as everybody thinks it is. I think they're actually going to be the second. As good as it should be. I think they missed D'Amico Ryan. I think you're right. Yeah. You text me out earlier, and I just didn't even think about it. But yeah, I think you're totally right.
They were out of place in so many plays where they probably have the best linebacking core, the inside linebacking core with Greenlaw and Warner in the NFL. Their line is stacked. Their corners are good. Their safeties are pretty good, and everybody was out of place. Like, there was so big of running lanes for the fucking Lions in that game in the beginning that it was blowing me away that they would hit the corner and nobody was over there. I mean, literally nobody for the 49ers were on the side of the field they were running to. I felt like when I messaged you, they're so out of place. Like, it's the scheme, I feel like, more than the players or the defense. I felt like the scheme was letting down the 49ers that game.
Yeah, it's what do you expect from the Lions? So the Lions are yards after the catch, run the football. Like, even on what is very impressive about this Lions team, we're going to talk about what they've done wrong, but this Lions team are very impressive. Like, they play the game in a way which is a bit different to other teams. We spoke about them being kind of like a 49ers light on the offensive side of the ball. on 3rd and 13, they're able to run the ball for first downs. I think when I saw that play, when they ran the ball
they picked up too, like what the fuck? 3rd and 12, 3rd and 3rd and 18.
When I saw,
they had so many 3rd and longs, it was amazing.
Yeah, when I was watching that, I was like, this game is over already. And it was very reminiscent of what the Packers were doing to the Cowboys. And it was very reminiscent of actually what the Packers did to the 49ers in that first half of the game as well, where you just gash them with the run game, the outside runs. So you take out Greenlaw, you take out their linebacking core, and you you either use Bosa's aggression against him, or you run towards Randy Gregory and Chase Young, who have been probably two of the most disappointing defensive linemen in the league this year when you actually think about the talent that's on that defensive line. So Lions played an excellent first half of football, and they caught the 49ers defense off guard, and the Lions defense stood up against the run. They tackled well on Christian McCaffrey, which is really important. Brock Purdy in the first half of games is not the same guy as he is in the second half of games, it looks like, which is pretty strange. But like Brock Purdy had a great game in the second half, so no shade on him in the first. But that interception was pretty horrible, and they just couldn't get anything going on either side of the ball. It would look like they were shell shocked. And what surprised me the most was, so there are teams which you can tell play off their fans. So the Bills are one, the Eagles are one, I think the Vikings are one to a certain extent, of when their fans, the Saints are definitely one where when their fans are loud, they're playing really well. And the Lions are probably the biggest component of that. Well, in the first half, the Lions fans took over that stadium. Like all the noise was Detroit Lions fan noise. In Santa Clara, and it felt like that game was just going to go totally against them. It was crazy. It looked like the whole 49ers, to be honest, if I'm being perfectly honest, it looked like Kyle Shanahan could be fighting for his job in the next year if it continued the way that it went. Like they wouldn't sack Kyle Shanahan, but there would be questions about him going into next year. If he lost another NFC championship game and they got totally blown out by the Lions. And that's what I was thinking about. And it looked like Brock Purdy was not going to be starting quarterback for the 49ers next year, and they're going to be making upgrades there. And every Brock Purdy hater was probably really happy watching that entire game. So the first half was insane.
Well, see, I think the second half was even more crazy if you think of the fact that besides that garbage touchdown at the end of the game that San Francisco played prevent to eat the clock, let them drive down the field slowly, didn't really care. They would have shut the Lions out in the second half. That's what's wild. They would have shut the Lions out in the second half. Christian McCaffrey is just a monster. He went, 20 for 90, 4.5 yards, but it's what he does for that team. He elevates that team so much. But I don't think, some people would have said it, but I don't think people in San Francisco's front office would ever be talking about it. Oh, Kyle Shanahan's on the hot seat. I just don't think so. He's had so many great winning seasons. What I think you would have heard is they need to go, even though it was the defense, you would have heard, oh, it's Brock Purdy. You got to go get Kirk Cousins. So part of me is like, good, I'm glad you won this game. Quit talking about Kirk Cousins going to San Francisco. We can stop with that bullshit now. The Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey pretty much won the 49ers that game because McCaffrey, they just kept pounding that run. He was picking up enough yards. But where Brock Purdy impressed me, it's not with the 20 for 31 for 267 and the touchdown. Where I'm really impressed with Brock Purdy, it's the 5 rushes for 48 yards. They were huge yards. Brock Purdy, first read, second read, fuck you, the middle's wide open, I'm gone. Like, that was very impressive in the second half. Brock Purdy extended drives. He made big plays when they needed to with his arm. He was the general in the second half, marching that team repeatedly down the field. The defense finally got their scheme together and made the stop so they could do it. But I was so impressed with Brock Purdy in that second half of the game that anybody who's talking shit about Brock Purdy today, it's just because they don't like him.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure how much it is that the 49ers defense actually getting it together and not the Lions throwing it away on the offensive side of the ball, but we'll talk about that.
I disagree with you. We can talk about that because I disagree with that statement 100%.
Yeah, I do want to talk about what Brock Purdy did really well, because so Christian McCaffrey did come out in that game and have ended with 90 yards and breaking tackles and was just fucking incredible. Just classic Christian McCaffrey. But I don't think he's able to do that if Brock Purdy doesn't start to show something. Brock Purdy comes out in the second half and is a totally different quarterback. He makes a couple of big throws in that game. But the thing that impressed me the most as well was those 48 yards in rushing and his escapism ability to extend the plays. Like the 49ers offensive line outside of Trent Williams is actually kind of average across the league in terms of things like PFF rating and pressures given and all of that
PFF.
kind of stuff.
All right, I just channeled my inner Tate Watt. Okay,
and all of that kind of stuff. So, but I think like I take away everything. Every question I've had about Brock Purdy was answered in that second half of the game. He shouldered that team. He is the reason why they won that game. Brock Purdy on the offensive side of the ball. He is the reason why they won that game. All the biggest plays, like the biggest play of the game had a big element of luck in it. The thing that completely turned the tide is that Ayuk interception off the face mask of the Detroit defender who should have had the interception. And the people who are chatting shit about Brock Purdy, and you're right, they're only saying it because they've attached their wagon to the fact that they don't like Brock Purdy and they can't do the whole thing of like new information should change your opinion. But that was a lucky throw from Brock Purdy, perhaps should have been a turnover, but I don't actually hate the decision of that throw anyway. That throw, like that was the right throw to make for that stage of the game. And he put it in a place where his wide receiver could go and get it. And his wide receiver went and got it for him. Like sometimes as a quarterback, you need to say, we need to spark something. My guy's one-on-one down the field. I'm launching this ball and my wide receiver can go get it. The wide receiver didn't get it in the most conventional way possible, but he went and got it. So that was a big play for me as well. And like it was the right call to make. And even if it wasn't an interception, the 49ers are so far behind the ball, they needed a spark in that game anyway. So I think that was the right play.
I think Brandon Ayuk
ended in a weird way.
Brandon Ayuk seemed like he had a monster game with only 3 receptions. That was wild too. Because they were
the biggest 3 receptions of the game. The biggest 3 receptions of the game.
I thought he had more receptions than that until I looked at the stat line. That's how big of a game it felt like he had. Where we saw Debo doing his Debo thing, right? So what did Debo had 8 for 89. Debo was picking up big first downs for them. But I thought Ayuk had a bigger game than he did because of how important those 3 receptions were.
Yeah, and that first reception where he catches it off the player's head, like you can put it down to luck, you can put it down to whatever. I put it down to really good focus. I think he calls it like Ayuk helps out his quarterback because I think he forces kind of like the dropped interception, and then he keeps the focus on the ball and he catches the ball. Like Brock Purdy put it up to his guy in a one-on-one situation, and Ayuk came down with it.
One of the biggest plays Ayuk had was he had to turn into a defender on the left sideline down the line because Brock Purdy launched one up that should have been that was going to be intercepted, and Ayuk went up and knocked that ball out of the defender's hands too. So Ayuk was huge in that way too. He kept the turnover from happening. He went from a wide receiver to a DB like that in the middle of that play.
Yeah, if that was the other way around, it would have 100% been PI.
See,
because he doesn't turn around to get the ball
over again. Because when you message me that, I'm like, I didn't see it, but they don't show the replay after I read your
Yeah.
message, thinking about it the way you just said it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'm like 2 plays. I'm like 2 plays behind you. But offensive PI is a totally different set of rules to defensive PI. So it wasn't a foul. Like, I'm not saying it was a foul. I'm just saying if Ayuk was the DB, they would have called
No,
PI on him
I'm
because he
just saying
doesn't
I
turn
have
his
to
head around
rewatch
to
it
catch the ball.
because it never crossed
It's
my
like it's a
mind
really
that way.
interesting play. Yeah, it's a really interesting play. Like, he doesn't turn his head back around to try and locate the ball, and he just kind of runs straight in. And I mean, the timing wasn't that off. It wasn't like an egregious one. I just think like it was the classic, Joe Flacco underthrows the ball on a one-on-one fit, like what Lamar Jackson should have done with OBJ, where he just underthrows the ball a little and you automatically get PI on that one-on-one fade. Like, that's what it kind of looked like.
No, your great quarterbacks do it on purpose. Like, if you watch, Brady's done it, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes. I can't
Flacco
get
does
this
it
over
better
the
than
top, so I'm going to throw it at the back shoulder of the defender and let my receiver stop and run right into him and get that pass interference. But I don't think it wasn't intentional that way. But I'm saying there's times where you see Rodgers, Mahomes, Brady, they've done that on purpose. Like, I can't complete this pass, but I sure can get this pass interference.
Yeah, I think one play that really is worth mentioning is it's in a really tense moment on third down around the 20-yard line of the 49ers, and Kyle Juszczyk makes that grab on the sideline with his
He had
two
two massive
feet in.
catches in that game too. Yeah.
Yeah, Brock Purdy. So Brock Purdy escapes the pocket, throws across his body, and Kyle Juszczyk helps him by dragging his feet in. Like, the 49ers came out in the second half dialed in.
That one over the middle on third down was huge by Juszczyk too.
Yeah, like Kyle Juszczyk is something. And it was interesting watching Ricard as well. So we probably saw the two best fullbacks in the league, one after another, in Ricard and Juszczyk. No offense to CJ Ham in Minnesota.
I'll give you Juszczyk, but like I just feel like a little offended on that comment.
A Ricard in like a totally different way, like where Ricard is just another offensive lineman, but every now and again breaks out and runs an absolutely awesome route that for some reason like Lamar just doesn't throw to. Like, well, I know the reason is like he'll throw the ball to him and then you're not getting much further than that. But sometimes Paul Ricard runs a really, really nice route if you just watch him, because it's quite funny to watch a guy who looks like a small offensive lineman running an outbreak towards the sideline about 5 yards down the field, which is pretty interesting. But Kyle Juszczyk is something else as well.
So talk about
when you're 17 points up or whatever it was.
Talk about how you think it was the Lions and not the 49ers that were the reason for the 49ers winning that game, because I felt like at halftime, the 49ers made every defense adjustment they needed to make and just came out and played like the 49ers we thought they should play. And I feel like I hear a lot of people going, oh, the Lions blew that game. They lost that game for themselves. I think two things can be true, but I think that the 49ers came out and snatched that game away and causing the Detroit to make bad decisions. So I feel like it could be a little bit of both, but I don't want to take away from what the 49ers did in that game to win it.
Yeah, so I think that the 49ers played a fucking amazing game in that second half. They played another two completely different halves of football, which are probably two of the best halves of football that any one team can play. But in the same way that the 49ers didn't like that in that first half kind of helped the Lions to play in their best half of football, I think the Lions also did their part to help the 49ers as well. So not taking away from the 49ers, you need both things to go into like this crazy comeback win. But I've just written down kind of whose fault is the loss. So the 49ers can credit themselves with the win, and I put that down to Brock Purdy. But the Lions also have to find out whose fault is it that they lost. And I think Goff misses 2 big-time throws for touchdowns, where if they get one of those, then that probably was the game. Like, and it reminded me of, I think Goff kind of proved why in a really sad way, because I don't think Goff had a bad game, and I think Goff has had a great season, and I think he's probably a top 10 quarterback in the league, maybe just outside of the top 10. He's in that realm where there's like 8 guys who are in the top 10 who like are actually between like 7 to 15. So I think Goff missed those
and shit.
So Goff missed those 2 big time throws, and it kind of showed why McVay wanted to get rid of him, because he did that as in the Super Bowl as well for the Rams. I think a lot of people are putting it on Dan Campbell going for it on 4th and 4th and not making it. Yeah, so going for it on 4th and not making it. So they made it on 1, but they failed on 3 attempts on 4th down. That's come to bite them other parts of the season as well. Like, you can say what you want about the Cowboys game, but if once they get forced back to the 7-yard line, they kick the fucking field goal, then they at least go into overtime as well. But he doesn't. But he wouldn't swallow his dummy. The Gibbs fumble, which is an excellent 49ers defensive play, so you can chalk that up to the 49ers. Gibbs had a really great game, but he runs the wrong route. He runs the wrong running lane and then doesn't secure the ball properly. And I also think there was an element of their defense kind of just falling apart, which their defense became the Detroit Lions defense that we know and love throughout the season, where it's one of the worst passing defenses in the league. And Brock Purdy came out and just absolutely tore them apart. But the one thing that encompasses all of these issues is the environment that Dan Campbell has created in Detroit. There is no team in the NFL that lets as much outside noise affect what they do on the field there. I think Dan Campbell going on 4th down, I don't necessarily hate it, but you become the favorites. I've been saying it all year. They play as if they're underdogs in every single game. Everybody's saying like, oh, but the metric for them going for like the analytics, if they go for it, yes. But if you don't get it, the analytics swing in such a massive skew in the other way. It's a high risk. High risk for not necessarily a massive amount of reward.
My analytics say if you actually learn how to punt the fuck or get rid of the ball or not go for it on 4th, you have 6 more points on the board. And there was another time you pin them down by their goal line instead of. Like, Dan Campbell going for it on 4th down every fucking time is part of the problem. Dan Campbell not knowing football situations is the problem. And nobody wants to talk about this, and nobody wants to hear this, because he's turned around a franchise that hasn't went to the playoffs in 30 years, blah, blah, blah. The Lions are going to fall back next year because Brian Johnson's leaving. He is what keeps that team going. That defense wasn't winning them games this year. It was that offense. And Dan Campbell is not the guy who has that offense clicking. It's Brian Johnson. So it'll never happen because you just went to an NFC championship game and people love him. But Dan Campbell should be gone. The Lions should be hiring and promoting Brian Johnson to a head coach. And another reason to me that proves that Dan Campbell's not the right guy for the job, after the game, he's like, yeah, man, like I told my guys, man, this might be the only time we get here, man. This might be our only chance, man. Like, really? Because you'll never hear Andy Reid tell Patrick Mahomes, this might be our only chance. You'd never hear Belichick tell Brady, this might be our only chance. You'd never even hear the Packers, who went to, 3 NFC championship games under Rodgers, last 4 years or whatever it was, talk like that either. It's that, to me, is losing mentality from a guy who can't believe that they actually made it to where they are.
Yeah, and I think that quote, this may be our only shot, is the mentality that he created in that building, and it's
So
we
do they?
represent this city that's gone through so much hardship, like Detroit, working class, like we're representing everybody from this city. This is our only shot. We're never gonna be here again. Like, play this as if it's your only game. Makes me understand why they go for it on fourth down all the time, because they're playing like fucking underdogs. And Ndamukong Suh, who's on the British broadcast, says like, oh, he's spoken to some of his mates who are still with the Lions, and he says, oh, that he coaches as if like how a player wants to play the game, and players always want to go for it on fourth, and they always want to go for the jugular. And it's like, yes, but that's the difference between the coach and the player. And look, who knows, because the times where he was going for it were from 45 and 43, which should be gimme field goals in the NFL, but you never know. So we never know if he's going to kick and score the points. And the analytics say they should go and win the game. But once you get up to, what was it, 21-3 at halftime, or whatever it was, 17 points up, or whatever it was.
I think. Yeah,
24-7. Yeah, whatever it was at halftime. You're then just ticking off you just accumulate the points. You just accumulate the distance. And the longer you stay out in front, the more desperate the 49ers have to get, the less they're allowed to run McCaffrey, the more pressure gets heaped on Brock Purdy, the more pressure gets heaped on Kyle Shanahan, who has all the narrative about him, about not being able to come back from behind, the more pressure comes off your defense to need to get a stop on every down, because at least you're still, I know you're not scoring touchdowns, but at least you're still ticking over in the points column. And also, the other part of this is he didn't go for it when they were like 3 yards out in the end of the first half. So the time to go for it and really go for the jugular, where if you get this play, it is automatic 7 points. They didn't go for it. Like, that's what made none of it make sense to me. Like, that was the weird one there.
Nobody wants to hear it, but Dan Campbell is not this like great head coach he's getting credit for. And to me, and I don't know if you agree or disagree, so you can let me know, but that mindset of this is our only shot, besides the fact that you think you're a fucking Eminem song, it's your only shot, but sets you up for failure next year now. What do you go into the locker room saying next year? You guys, this is our only shot again. Again, it's our only shot. Like, no, now these guys have heard all year, this is our only shot. This is our shot. This is where you got one opportunity. Okay, I'm done quoting Eminem. But how many fucking times do you say that before you get them to believe it, which might have been great this year, but now what do you do for next year? Because all these guys have to be sitting there at the offseason going, oh, that we blew our only shot. Like,
yeah, I kind of said it at the start of this playoffs, where the environment that Detroit have created, like, the fans obviously have the full right to create this environment of excitement. They've never been there. They haven't won the division in such a long time. Like, fucking have Eminem walking out for the fans, all of that. It is your job as the coach to not let that infect your team. Like, that is where the difference. Dan Campbell feeds off that kind of stuff, which is so great.
Just to hit another one of your points, and you can drive this home,
yeah.
Especially when your coach is not a coordinator and he's just a CEO.
Yes. So when your whole point, so Dan Campbell, right? And this falls under the same thing of Nick Sirianni, because I think he feeds off the whole hype and everything like that as well, to motivate and excite his team. Dan Campbell is great at that. But when you're bringing that thought process into play calling, and you're bringing that thought process into the actual game, use it in training. Have fucking Eminem playing on speakers all the way through training. Like, bring in fans to say how important it is, like, throughout training, just to keep the energy. But once you get to the game time, you should be feeding off like logic and sense and send your players out there all amped up and whatever, but you're stable. And what it felt like is he created an environment, since the Cowboys game especially, he created an environment of the NFL is against us. Look what we're doing for this city, where the whole like the US government is against the city that we represent. Nobody thinks we can do this. Like, this is our only shot. We'll never get this again. Like, you're representing this city. This city has had nothing go right for it for 30 years or whatever, since Motown started to fall down. Like, this city's been downtrodden. It's a really blue collar city. And then when things start to go wrong, like Goff misses one big time throw for a touchdown, or Gibbs fumbles a ball, or McCaffrey breaks off a big play, the pressure then explodes into, oh my God, it's all falling apart. What am I going to do? And they don't have that then balance from a guy like Dan Campbell. They don't have that then balance to say, oh, okay, we just go again. Like, they look like, especially on the defensive side of the ball, they look like it all fell apart and just the pressure became too much. And it's what I've been saying all playoffs. I was like, look out for this happening, where like it just all explodes in their face at one point or another.
I didn't even think about this till you were just talking through this. One, before I get into what I'm going to say, I agree that Nick Sirianni is the guy who gets them pumped too, but I guarantee you he's more level-headed and would never have his team thinking this is our only shot. Second,
yeah, I think he's more level at game time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Second, Dan Campbell is coaching like he's still a player. He's coaching off emotion. And I didn't think about this till you said it. But everything he does is like he's still a player, and he's not the CEO of this company, this multi-fucking billion-dollar company, which is an NFL franchise, right? So he's out there rah-rah-rahing and cheerleading like he's one of the players when he's not the guy being level-headed, not the guy making the right calls, and he's letting emotions affect his play calling. And they're going to say, well, this is what he did all year. Yeah, because the dumbass let emotion dictate his play calling all year. And it finally caught up with his ass in the playoffs, which we watched it catch up with him a couple times in the regular season, but people brushed that off because one loss in the regular season doesn't send you home, right? Like Dan Campbell, people are just going to tell me I'm a fucking hater, which is fine because there is a little bit to that because Dan Campbell annoys the shit out of me. But you can't realistically look at what's going on in Detroit and tell me that the coach isn't some of the reason why they're not in the NFC Championship game right now. And again, I know it's not official yet, but the way it sounds is Johnson's on his way to fucking Washington, the Commanders. Sounds like he's going to be the head coach of the Commanders. So now you got a new offensive coordinator who I don't believe is going to recapture the magic that Johnson brought there, because that dude's done an amazing job since he took over calling the plays for them. And where do they go from there after you're going to have a new offensive coordinator, a new scheme somewhat? Even if you keep the same exact scheme, it's going to be different because you have a different play caller. And Dan Campbell just told you all last year that was your only shot. So now you no longer have a shot. So what are we even doing here?
Yeah, I think they are in a bit of trouble here because they have the look. I just want to say, like, I do think Dan Campbell is what Detroit needed 3 years ago. I do think they needed to get this idea.
The rah-rah cheerleader.
They were soft. Yeah, the rah-rah cheerleader, and he was excellent 3 years ago. But now they're at a point where the GM has created an amazing roster. If you gave Kyle Shanahan that roster, this game would have been the other way around. If you switch coaches, the Lions would have won and the 49ers would have lost. Not that the 49ers have a terrible roster. I just think Kyle Shanahan is that much better than Dan Campbell in that situation. So I do think that Dan Campbell is exactly what they need. And look, I want my tight end coach to be going fucking crazy on the sideline and geeing everybody up and an absolute total nut in the dressing room. I like that from Dan Campbell. Like, saying we're going to bite kneecaps off. That's exactly what Detroit needed at the time. Like, it's stupid now that you actually have a good team to hold that mentality. And what we've said all the way through the year is you've created this idea where you have to be an underdog. Like Detroit can't play football if they're the favorite, is what it looks like. And I messaged you when they went 14-0 up and said, I think now Detroit might be the favorite. And that actually really works against them when they're the favorite because of the brand of football that they play. Look, Detroit with that stadium bouncing, do I think they fall apart the same way that they did yesterday? No. And they would have been the first seed if it wasn't for Dan Campbell being over emotional in his play calling. Like, all right, we don't know what would have happened with the Cowboys game, but if he wasn't over emotional, yeah, and obviously the refs, but if he wasn't over emotional, like at least it goes into overtime. At least it goes into overtime, right? So at least they still have the opportunity to win that game. There's also the Bears game that they lose 28 points to 13. Well, they went for it on 4th down 5 times and only made it. No, they went for it on 4th down 6 times and only made it once in that game, and it was 28 points to 13. There's one more.
Why do they even pay a punter in Detroit? Because they don't punt
in Detroit. Yeah, in Detroit. So they go for it there, and then in that game against the Packers that they lose as well, 22 points to 29, they go for it 6 times on 4th down and only make it 1 time. So that is 3 games where Dan Campbell's emotions have cost you the win, and you could have been playing that NFC Championship game at home if Dan Campbell just said, oh, my team isn't an underdog in this game. We are the better team. Let's just play safe, kick the ball back. Like, also, the brain drain it should be a real worry in Detroit because their defensive coordinator is just not like sometimes he seems to call a good game, and every now and again they like look decent, but like they're the worst passing defense in football. So you're not going to win games if you're like that as well. So like I honestly think this season is down to Dan Campbell.
I remember texting you at one point and going, if Dan Campbell doesn't kick this field goal, he should be fired.
Yeah, it's the accumulation of points when you're ahead, right? Is so important.
Yeah, it's like I can't remember what game I was watching last week, but I had a problem with a team going for the touchdown on 4th down near the end zone because it was the first quarter. And I'm like, me and Scott, my buddy who were in the fantasy with Coney Island Warriors, are texting back and forth. And I'm just like, stop chasing fucking points at the beginning of a game. Stop chasing points at the beginning of a game. Like, chase them in the second half if you need them. But like, just take the field goal, kick off, and play some fucking defense. And Dan Campbell just can't handle not coming away with a touchdown on a drive. There's something really weird about the way he coaches. And us fans are supposed to be more unrealistic than the coaches, right? Like they're supposed to, because I'll be at home screaming at fucking Kevin O'Connell to go for it on 4th, right? Sometimes. And he's pretty aggressive. He goes for it on 4th a lot, but nothing like Dan Campbell.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
And then he punts, and then we stop him, and we get the ball back in better position. I'm like, oh, that was a good call. I'm supposed to be the irrational one as the fan. You as the coach are supposed to be the rational one who makes the right decisions, right? Because as a fan, I mean, I know dudes who are like, you're on your own 30 and it's 4th and a yard, and they're like, go for it. It's like, no, because even if we get it, the reward is not big enough for what bad's going to happen if we don't, right? Like, and Dan Campbell just makes the worst decisions, and not only the worst decisions, but at the worst possible time. And on top of it, like you were saying, he accumulates bad decisions on top of each other, right? So I don't know if you said it was the Bears game or the Packers game. I forgot. They went for it 6 times.
Both.
Okay.
Both.
6
Yeah,
times.
the 2 losses, they went for it 6 times and made it once, or 5 times and made it once. They're 1 and 5 on fourth down efficiency.
So you went for it 11 times and made it 2 times.
Yeah, in 2 divisional games.
Less than 20%. Like, if you're an analytics guy,
games.
That's less than 20%. What the fuck are you doing?
If they win, if they win one of those games, they're the first seed in the NFC Championship. They're the first seed. They're the first seed in the NFL, in the NFC. If they win one of those games,
it's not about making bad decisions. It's about making accumulation of bad decisions. No coach, no player, no person is ever going to be perfect, right? I just always said this to my kid and my wife. You can only be perfect in fleeting moments, right? Like, there's no such thing as perfection. You can throw a perfect pass. You can hit a perfect home run. You can be perfect in fleeting moments, but there's no such thing as being perfect. As people, our job is to not compound mistakes. And when you're a coach, that is a lot of what coaching is. By putting your team in the right position is by mitigating like bad plays, bad choices. And yes, everybody's going to make mistakes at time, but you made a bad decision 11 fucking times in 2 games. And now you come to this game. You made a bad decision. What did they go for it? 4 and made it 1?
In this game.
You just said it too. I forgot. But yeah. Like, what the fuck are you doing? You left points. You took points off the board that you could have had by going for it a couple times too. In a game where every point fucking mattered.
Yeah, they actually outgained the 49ers by 29 yards, so 30 yards. And in that Packers game earlier in the season, they outgained the Packers by 100 yards. But because they kept on going for it on fourth down, they lost by 7 points. And like, I really do understand it from an analytics point of view. Like, if you make that the swing in your win percentage across the game makes loads of sense. But if you do it every single time, because if you don't make it, then the swing goes so far other to the other team as well. So it's like fans who look into analytics and don't 100% get it, and I don't 100% get it either, would need to probably quit my full-time job and to really, really understand it and really get into it. But the swing, the way it works is, yes, you are 8% more likely to win the game if you make this fourth down, right? But if you don't make it, the other team becomes 6% more likely. But if you kick the field goal, you become 3% more likely to win, to get it. And you should make the field goal on 95% of the time. Whereas the fourth down, their fourth down conversion, they could be one of the best fourth down conversions in the league, but actually their fourth down conversion across the season is actually way less than 50%. But people take it game by game. They don't take it, add them all up together and include all the games that they've lost and it's not gone well. So I would be interested to know which games they won because they went for it on fourth down a decent amount of the time, but none come to mind. But those 2 where they went for it the whole time, I'm pro going for it, but I'm not pro going for it all the time. And especially when you're in the lead, and not going for it when you're inside the opponent 5-yard line going into halftime, where you could be up 28 points to 7 going in at halftime. You then take the 3 there, but you don't take the 3 when you're 45 yards out. Like, that made no sense. That made no, like, if you're going to go for it, then fucking go for it. And I honestly think it's an ego thing with Dan Campbell a little bit. Like, I think it's because it's what everybody expects of him now. Like, everybody expects him to go for it. And I honestly think it's slightly an ego thing. And I think they listen to outside noise too much in that building. And I think he's created a really toxic environment that just bubbled over into mistakes, them compounding mistakes, which compounded mistakes. It's like what happened with Zay Flowers, right? Like, Zay Flowers makes the mistake of taunting the player because he becomes over emotional. He's then chasing, trying to make up for his mistake. So when they could be down at the 1-yard line, it's a fumble out the back of the, it's a touchback fumble. And then he makes another mistake by lacerating his fucking finger by getting over emotional and doing that. Dan Campbell did the same, but just from a coaching point of view. And look, it's where, like, people can blame it on what they want, and people can blame it on Jared Goff if they want to. Like, I understand where you're coming from that point of view as well, because if Jared Goff makes that, but if Jared Goff misses that throw, which he did, but you then still take the 3 points. You don't then go for it again on 4th down. And everybody says like, oh, well, on one of those plays, Reynolds drops the 4th down. And it's like, yes, but that's your players. Like, that's your players who drop it on 4th down there. That made no sense to me. One exciting time to be a 49ers fan. As much as I hate the 49ers as a Cowboys fan, like, they do deserve it. They were the best team in the NFC.
Niner gang. If you haven't hit that subscribe yet, please do that. We'd appreciate that. But thanks for tuning in and checking us out. And then, so you were saying how, you're compounding problems, what we both were saying. And then Dan Campbell, Jared Goff misses that pass. Well, okay, first of all, just so people get this, quarterbacks are going to miss passes. That happens.
Yeah.
You just took away everything that team did to get you into scoring position by not walking away with the 3 points, by making a bad decision. That in itself has to be a letdown to the team. We just drove all the way down there, and now, we came away with nothing because our coach makes another bad decision on when to go for it on 4th down.
Yeah, it would be nice if the 49ers could just fix some sort of curse that the Cowboys have worked themselves out. Fucking the Cowboys and the 49ers are cursed together. Which is good fun. But yeah,
you killed momentum was my point too, though, because you came away with 0 points off of drives that should have been at least 3.
Yeah, by being overly aggressive on that side of the ball, you then compound your own players' mistakes, which then make the players feel like they're at fault, and then they're in their own heads, and then you lose a momentum game, and everything becomes so pressurized when you play that aggressively.
Especially when the 49ers came out in the second half and it already showed they made the adjustments. Like I said, the first half, their players were so out of position on defense that guys were running free down the sideline. You're like, how the fuck did he hit that corner and nobody's there for 20 yards to tackle him, right? Or that first touchdown by Williamson, he comes around and nobody's there, and then Greenlaw grabs his shirt and the shirt rips, so that helps. But it's like the 49ers made all the adjustments at half that they needed to make. You come out, the 49ers are in your face, playing defense, and next thing you know, you're in scoring position and you decide to go for it and not get any points when points are at a premium. So I don't want to take anything away from the 49ers, because 49ers came out in that second half and played fucking amazing and stuck it to them. But Dan Campbell's the reason that the Lions are having issues, and people want to keep praising him for where they're at. And like you said, okay, yes, Dan Campbell is what they needed 3 years ago. But what they need right now is Brian Johnson, and they're not going to have him.
Yeah, what they need right now is now you've created the story of the GM is absolutely fantastic.
2 weeks in a row, you guys did it. Congrats.
Yeah, well played. The 49ers, by the way, like, as we are slagging off Dan Campbell, it is important to note, I think we both thought the 49ers are probably the best team in the NFC for quite some time. Now, you were the Eagles, like, at the start of the season, which did make total sense until they completely fell apart. But yeah, the 49ers that's an interesting point on Moody.
I agree with the first part of this comment. I don't think it's that they don't trust their kicker. I think Dan Campbell's just a fucking idiot.
Yeah, that's what I think as well. Like, yes, because it is an important part to talk about with Dan Campbell, actually, where when we're talking about this, where we're assuming that the kicker kicks those field goals from the 45 and the 43. Well, like, that he should be making them. And if you have a kicker that you don't trust and won't make them, then that is also on you, because you haven't fixed that problem of, like, going out and finding a kicker. So whether it is he's an idiot who doesn't trust his kicker, that just means he's not found the right kicker, like, which is all weird. Which is all weird, but Dan Campbell is just a crazy
Niner
guy.
gang. Maddie was just talking about in 2 games against the Packers and the Bears, they went for it 11 times and only converted it twice. 5 against the Bears, 6 against the Packers, or I might have that vice versa. But yeah,
Yeah, I think actually they went for it in 5 both games, so 10 times they converted twice, and lost both of those games. But the sorry the way that Dan Campbell created this pressurized environment, it was actually like you saw it unraveling against the Bucks the week before, where they let the Bucks back in that game, and the Bucks could have had a game. And it's stupid things. It's actually really fucking stupid things as well. Like one play that we haven't spoken about, which just blew my mind, was running the ball on third and goal, 5 yards out, where they have to then use a timeout because they don't make it, which means they then have to, like, it's all and that could be Ben Johnson who called that play. But if you're Dan Campbell, you have to
override it.
No, don't do that. You override it. Like, you override that as well. So look, like, yes, I do want to make it very known again that Dan Campbell has done a great job for the Lions up until this season. This season, he's actually cost them the number 1 seed, and he's now cost them a spot in the Super Bowl, in our opinion, obviously. And the 49ers are the best team in the NFC. Yeah, because he ran the whole thing on emotion, and his players. Look, I think his players, especially the defense. I think the defense fell apart because they all saw it unraveling because of the amount of pressure. And on top of that, Brock Purdy played excellently, and Christian McCaffrey came out running fierce.
And I'll end it by just saying this again, okay? Dan Campbell. Okay, going for it on 4th down, I had problems with, and everything else. The biggest mistake he made was telling his team, this might be our only shot, and repeating it. Because going into next season now, these players are like, well, we just fucked up our only shot. What are we going to do now? Like, and people can say they're adults, they're grown people, they're going to make their own decisions. I don't care who you are. If you get something reinforced to you over and over and over, it subconsciously seeps into you. And the players are going to feel like they missed their window.
Yeah, that's what I think I want people to take away from our show today. To all of you watching, we're not the same as the people who've gone on and said, oh, it's just because he goes for it on 4th down that cost them the game. Because, like, okay, you make it 1 and 3 on what?
I said that's the easy part to blame, right? Like, you got to look.
Yeah, that's the easy part to blame. It's not like, or if they scored 6 points, they would have won the game. Which, like, okay, fair enough, but you don't know what happens if they score those field goals. You don't know if, like, you don't know if they score it. You don't know if so. Actually, going for it on 4th down isn't necessarily the problem. It's just one of the symptoms of the environment he's created throughout this season that led to the loss, of the over-aggression, of the over-emotion, of this is our one shot. And when things start to unravel, when they started to unravel against Tampa, I'd message you and said, this would be the most Lions way to go out ever. And once they started to unravel, and once Brock Purdy started playing, and Brock Purdy, the MVP of that game, was fucking superb. If you've just tuned in, go look back at what we were saying about Brock Purdy earlier. But once Brock Purdy started playing well, breaking out, it just felt like it all unraveled because of the pressurized nature that Dan Campbell's created in that organization.
Well, before we get out of here, Maddie, I just took a look. Now, this might change because we are like 2 weeks away, but Chiefs favored, or 49ers favored by 1 point going in against the Chiefs.
Interesting. It's I thought it would be more than that. I thought
you said 3 last night, and I said 2.5. So yeah,
2.5. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm surprised just because of roster by roster, but never discount the Chiefs they are defending champs, and like the way that they played against the Ravens, man, like it looks like they're made to be there.
I think it's going to be a great game.
Yeah, I think I'm excited. I'm excited for it. It also flunks the whole. Have you seen the conspiracy theory of like the Super Bowl logo?
Colors.
Like, if the Super Bowl logo colors, at least it fixes that now. At least like that's changed.
No.
Which is great.
It doesn't. Those conspiracy fucks are going to be on the internet going, they changed it because we figured it out. They changed it because we figured it out. That's going to be the
they're not
shit
going to
you
make it
hear.
all red.
And here's the thing. Rodgers made a joke about it, which made it take more life to it because people are like, Aaron Rodgers believes the conspiracy theory, which he made a joke that just said, hey, NFL, I saw this. Can you make the logo green next year? That's all he said. He was joking. And then everybody takes it out of context and it gives it legs, and now it's going to be a running thing.
It also doesn't help that Aaron Rodgers is like anti-vax, like bit conspiracy theory
But see,
guy.
that's the thing too that's kind of misleading. He was never anti-vaccine. He was anti-him because he's allergic to what's in the mRNA, whatever.
Yeah.
And then the Johnson & Johnson was having people fall the fuck out. So he was like, I'm not getting it, right? He gets so much heat for shit that, and I'm not a Packer. You know I fucking hate the Packers. So I'm not standing here trying to defend Rodgers. I'm not a Jets fan. I just watch Pat McAfee. So I actually see the way these things are said. And then you have some asshole, which I might be that asshole if I was in the media, types it up, throws it in fucking on the screen. And then when you read it, you know what I'm saying. If they typed up what we said on here, we would look like complete jerk offs when we're joking. Because you don't get the context.
People only read headlines now, which is just absolutely ridiculous to me. Before we go, do you want to talk a little bit about Kellen Moore going to the Eagles, or any?
Actually, the more I think about it, I think it's going to be really good for the Eagles. And not that I'm the biggest Kellen Moore fan, but I think it's going to change the way they operate. For the last few years, which isn't necessarily, not saying they operated bad, but change can be good. I think Jalen Hurts is ready to take a next step. And Kellen Moore did a lot with Dak Prescott's growth at times. You know what I mean? So, I think it'll actually be good for Jalen Hurts. And I said to you, I think the biggest difference from last year to this year in their running game was Swift. Because Swift is big plays, but I've been saying it to you since he was with the Lions. He's soft. And I think that caused them problems too. I think that the Eagles are smart enough that they're going to make adjustments, come back out, and be a really good team again next year. But I'm excited. I think that Vic Fangio going to that defense is going to be huge for that defense also. I like what the Eagles are doing. You as a Cowboy fan, probably, if you like it, it means you hate it, right?
So it, as I said to you, it is a shame to see a good Cowboy tarnished with the Eagles colors. Because Kellen Moore was a good servant to the Cowboys for a long period of time. But I think they've made the exact moves that the Eagles needed to make. When you have a coach like Sirianni, where it just didn't go. It just didn't go right for him this season. The coaching hires didn't go right this season. Everything kind of fell apart towards the end. You then get Kellen Moore, whether you think Mike McCarthy's better or not, whether you think, I don't think he had a fair crack of it in the Chargers because his whole entire wide receiver core got injured. Justin Herbert got injured, and he was working under one of the more incompetent head coaches in the league. So whether you think of that, I think Kellen Moore is a proven commodity and had one of the highest scoring offenses in the league 2 seasons running. So I think he's a great hire for the Eagles, which is a real fucking shame for me. And then I think Vic Fangio as well is a great hire for them as well. I think getting 2 guys, it feels the same as when they had Steichen and Cardinals head coach Gammon. It feels the same as when they had those 2, where it's 2 head coach caliber offensive coordinator for you. Works really well with Nick Sirianni's motivational style, loves them all in the locker room and all of that kind of stuff. So,
and he is an offensive
great
side of the ball.
Eagles.
Sirianni has worked on the offensive side of the ball, special teams. So things. Nick Sirianni is actually a great comparison for everybody, though, who thinks I'm just a fucking hater when it comes to Dan Campbell, and I'll never change my opinion. Sirianni's opening press conference, I thought he was a fucktard too. His opening press conference was awful, and I thought he was a fucktard. And then Sirianni started coaching, and I watched him coach. And I came around on Sirianni, and I actually like him now. So this isn't just me hating Dan Campbell for hating Dan Campbell's sake. It's that I just think that he pissed me off in the first press conference with the biting the kneecaps off. Like, I don't know if pissed me off's the right word, but he just,
I like it. I think it's what they needed at the time, but it's just now when you look at it.
No grown ass man should be sitting there going, "Yeah, man, we're gonna bite kneecaps off, man."
Gonna get knocked down, and when we get up, we'll take a kneecap on the way.
But the coaching the coaching didn't sway me at all on my thoughts on Dan Campbell.
Yeah.
Whereas on Sirianni, his actual doing his job changed my thoughts on Sirianni. And I think you say this, I say this, but we get stuck way too much in life, and especially sports. People take a stand and never willing to change that stand, even when new information comes available or when you watch the guys actually do the job they were hired to do. So I don't know. Like, I think Sirianni's a good coach. I think he's getting a lot of hate that he shouldn't get. I don't call for coaches' jobs who make the playoffs. You know that. But I do think in this occasion, the Lions are going to fuck themselves by not keeping Johnson. And it's going to hurt way more than if they didn't have Dan Campbell.
Yeah. I think the brain drain is the other issue. But if you're going to be a CEO, head coach, like Sirianni, like the Harbaughs, like Dan Campbell, the next step is, if you're doing it well, you're going to be losing your offensive coordinators and your defensive coordinators to other teams. It's about how you hire the next coach, how you train up the next coach. Now, Sirianni's gone the other way, and he's going to work with 2 established coaches. And I think that works really well for him, because I think it's a good system for him to fit into. We'll see if Dan Campbell's able to get the next guy and coach him up on the next offense, and we'll see how that goes.
I've said this before. What makes Jim Harbaugh a really great coach beyond the X's and O's is not only does he develop players, he develops coaches. You don't see that a lot in the NFL, and we need to see more of that too, where your head coach is developing the next coach while they're coaching.
Yeah, it's like McVay is like, it's the reason the McVay tree is so successful, or you can call that the Shanahan tree, like, if you want to.
It is the Mike Shanahan tree, yeah.
The Mike Shanahan down into McVay and all of that kind of stuff. So, they like coach them up. That Washington staff, for example, like, they coach them up. Andy Reid coaches his coaches up as well, and it's a really important part of the job, that especially if you're a CEO, head coach who doesn't call plays.
Yeah. All right. Well, we went on an hour and 40-minute rant about 2 games, which is kind of impressive.
Just like, we were just proved right about Dan Campbell, and that felt really good.
Yeah. I don't really feel joy on dancing on Dan Campbell, but I do feel joy that the fucking Lions are not in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't feel bad for Lions fans last night. I felt bad for them this morning. I felt a little bad for them this morning, because you're allowed to get as excited and chat as much shit as you want when you've been down that long, and then you get up. And
shout out to my guy Randy, DJ Hayes. Anybody around Wisconsin knows who DJ Hayes is. Bang Bang Niners gang. That's for you, my guy. Bang Bang Niners gang. There you go.
I don't feel comfortable in endorsing any 49ers love here, unfortunately, but good for them. They're the best team in the NFC this year. Best team won.
Did Maddie just give us a teaser on maybe who he's picking in the Super Bowl? I guess you'll have to stay tuned to see.
I don't let my personal endeavors and feelings towards a team affect my betting spread picks, but
we'll see. We'll see if that was a little bit of a Freudian slip from Maddie of what's coming. Where you're like meant to look at your wife and say, "Patch the potatoes," and you just like, "Bitch, you ruined my life," like that kind of thing. Like, so, yeah. Okay, I don't know.
That was a good one.
I'm gonna get divorced because she's gonna think I'm talking about her or some shit. Good thing she wasn't making potatoes at the time.
Well, I hope you're talking about her and not your other wife, Jay. Like,
If my wife watches Sister Wives, I could not do more than one wife. That shit would be wild. Like, I've been with my wife for over 20 years, and I love my wife, but one is enough. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. We're going to come back later this week with our Yankee and the Brit awards for the season. We're going to hand out the awards. I'm sure some of them will line up with what the NFL does, but we're going to get in here and give you our awards a couple days before the NFL gets in here. What are we, 10 days away from the NFL dropping the award ceremony, I think? We'll get in here and give you the Yankee and the Brit awards before the NFL can give you theirs.
It's important to remember that ours are stamped with the seal of being international awards, whereas the NFLs are just American, whereas ours are international. So
I'm going to come up with something for that. Now that you said that, I'm coming up with something for that before the show. The international Yankee and the Brit NFL awards. Some shit.
Just remember what's more important to you, you know, like full world representation or not, you know, that's full world recognition.
I'll say it because you can't. We're Americans. I might be all right. Might be fuck what the world thinks at that point. But I said to you the other day, I said both of our countries have perfected nationalism.
Yeah, I do feel like I just tried to do the whole most British thing where Britain still represents the rest of the world, apparently. To the most like similar countries.
At one point in time throughout history, you pretty much went to war with everybody in the world. So I mean, who better to know?
Yeah, you know.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll be back. Hit us in the comments, hit that like and subscribe. And then tomorrow, don't miss out. We got Well Beyond the Arc, where they're going to be talking some Lakers, but they're really going to be talking a lot about Doc Rivers going to the Bucks. So that's the title of tomorrow's show. What's up, Doc? And then we got MMA Underground, which is going to be a banger because they're coming off of that big event that just went down in the West Coast on Saturday.
Yeah, most importantly to know about Outside the Arc is that Well Beyond the Arc, sorry, is that if you get into the comments and just start chatting shit, Jay'll put it on the screen and then they get to answer those questions as well. So if you want anybody to talk about anything.
If you like it's fun brutal, not like disrespectful brutal. But if you like to have fun and if you're not soft and you don't mind somebody just tearing your opinion apart, and sometimes I think your opinion gets torn apart just because it's your opinion. You're like the other person. But it's a lot of fun and everybody in there has a good time with it. The chat is a show in itself.
Yeah, so come join for Well Beyond the Arc. And they'll talk about whatever the fuck you want them to talk about, really. Like if you just decide there's a basketball topic you want to talk about, like they'll go off script and talk about it. Same with our shows, obviously.
Yeah, sometimes I hold the comments back until they're finishing up their segment because I know if I throw that comment up, that segment's going out the window. So as the producer, I don't always feel like I need to go for it on 4th and short.
There you go. Well done. That's a great place to end it.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. One world, one love. Deuces.
Cheerio.